Hi, good evening everybody. Hi Anita, hi Trevor. So nice. Hello Simon, if you're watching this secretly somehow. Thank you very much for all the hearts and love. I hope you guys, did somebody just give me an angry sign? Very nice to begin with. I hope you are all having a halfway decent time in isolation. I don't have anything more to say actually. It's rather a long chapter today, so I'm just gonna delve right in. I did want to tell you a couple of things though before I forget, because at the end you'll probably just want to turn off your lights and go straight to sleep, because it really is quite a long one today. So there will be at the end of this week, hopefully a friend is going to be giving us a Shakespeare monologue, which is going to be really, really lovely. It's a very, very famous one. I'll tell you more about it on Friday, which I think is the last night that I'm on. I have posted on the Vienna Theatre Project website, on the page, the Facebook page, a number of links to discover how you can watch Andrew Lloyd Webber live stream some of his shows, which he's putting online for free. The same for the National Theatre and for the Globe. So do look at our Facebook page afterwards for those of you who are joining us for the first time or didn't know that we had those up there. Those are up there, and it can tell you nights that you can free stream or however you do that and watch some of their shows. They're showing them weekly at the moment, so that's a really great thing. And actually, generally, if you look through the web, you'll find there's quite a lot of content, and there are a number of theatres in Vienna, by the way. The Tag is one of them, Theater Ache is another, who are also, the Theater Ache are actually doing shows. They just have the couple that run it, I believe, are just doing shows and going there on their own and doing stuff like that. The Tag are showing stuff that they have filmed beforehand, shows that they've done before. For the Austrian, for actors in Austria, if you do not know this and you haven't checked it out yet, although I'm sure many of you have, the MA7 is offering a fund for entertainers. You can go onto their website and you can apply for up to 3,000 euros. So if you are struggling, if you have no money coming in, you had a project happening but it's fallen through the floor because of everything that's been going on right now, take a look at the MA7 website and find out whether you would be eligible to get some money back or some money altogether, so that you are not starving too much in these terrible times. So that's some information for you. Oh, one thing I also did want to say, if you are having a bit of a hard time at the moment and coming on to us at 21:45 in the evening is a little bit too long to wait for a lovely time, I do recommend, I said it the other night, Jay Shetty is doing these live meditations. He may have finished them by now, actually. I don't know whether it was the last one today or something. But you can recap and watch his old ones. And I have to say, just for 10 minutes doing a little, oh, that smells nice. Just for 10 minutes doing a nice little bit of relaxation and breathing, and he gives some good ideas on things that can help you relieve the stress of what you're going through right now, potentially. Totally recommend him. I'm going to finish with all that stuff and get on with the reading. As I say, it is a bit of a long one tonight, so if you haven't gone to the toilet yet now, but you saw yesterday, so you know what went on, go quickly now, make yourself a cup of tea. I already have my tea, or glass of water, and over there my Moroccan tea, with my little Moroccan teacup, just in case this stuff over here isn't enough. To recap last night, tell you very quickly, remember when I was on, the first calendar had told his story about how he had ended up with his uncle and his father being killed, and then he ended up back as his uncle, and his favourite cousin had disappeared and ended up being burnt to a scorcher with his girlfriend, who actually ended up being his sister. Then the wazir, the bad wazir who murdered his father, came and overtook the uncle's land as well, and they had to escape. And that's how he came across the other two Kalandars, who were telling their stories to be able to survive, because the ladies of Baghdad are otherwise going to kill them. It's very, very intricate. So the second Kalandar is now telling the ladies of Baghdad his story, and the story starts out that he was also a prince. Of course he was. So he was also a prince, and he was invited to the land of Hind, and he travelled there, and as he had almost arrived and crossed waters, he was hit upon by a bunch of wild Arabs who stole all of his goods, his camels and everything, left him stranded. Eventually, having lost all his things, he came across a young lady in a cave, I believe, or something, and she had been captured and kept there against her will, happens rather regularly in the 1001 Arabian Nights, by a genie, by an Ifrit. And he said, so the second Calendar, who was the prince, the ex-prince now, said that he would save her from the Ifrit by calling him and challenging him. And she said, don't call him. And he said he's going to. And now you're going to find out why it was a really bad idea not to listen to this young lady. So here we go. And we are now on the 13th night of 1001 Arabian Nights. Enjoy. Shahrazad said to the king, "It hath occurred to me, O auspicious king, that the second Calendar thus continued his tale to the lady, but when, O my mistress, I kicked that alcove with a mighty kick, behold, the air starkened and darkened and thundered and lightened. The earth trembled and quaked, and the world became invisible. At once the fumes of wine left my head. I cried to her, 'What is the matter?' And she replied, 'The Ifrit is upon us. Did I not warn thee of this? By Allah, thou hast brought ruin upon me. But fly for thy life and go up by the way thou camest.' So I fled up the staircase, but in the excess of my fear, I forgot sandals and hatchet. And when I had mounted 2 steps, I turned to look for them, and lo, I saw the earth cleave asunder, and there rose from it an Ifrit, a monster of hideousness, who said to the damsel, 'What trouble and pother be thee wherewith thou disturbest me? What mishap hath betided thee?' 'No mishap hath befallen me,' she answered, 'save that my breast was straitened and my heart heavy with sadness. So I drank a little wine to broaden it and to hearten myself. Then I rose to obey a call of nature, but the wine had gotten into my head and I fell against the alcove.' 'Thou liest, thou whore, thou art,' shrieked the Ifrit. And he looked around the hall, right and left, till he caught sight of my axe and sandals, and said to her, 'What be these belongings of some mortal who have been in thy society?' And she answered, 'I never set eyes upon them till this moment. They must have been brought by thee cleaving to thy garments.' Quoth the Ifrit, 'These words are absurd, thou harlot, thou strumpet.' Then he stripped her stark naked, stretching her upon the floor, bound her hands and feet to 4 stakes like one crucified, and set about torturing her and trying to make her confess. I could not bear to stand listening to her cries and groans, so I climbed the stair on the quake of fear, and when I reached the top, I replaced the trapdoor and covered it with earth. Then I repented. I of what I had done with penitence exceeding, and thought of the lady and her beauty and her loveliness, and the tortures she was suffering at the hands of the accursed Ifrit after her quiet life. So can everyone hear me okay? I've just been given a message and I wasn't sure if you could all hear me. You can, okay? Good. If not, please somebody send me lots of signs of anger or something like that and let me know. Here we go again, sorry. Then I repented of what I have done with penitence exceeding, and thought of the lady and her beauty and loveliness, and the tortures she was suffering at the hand of the accursed Ilfrit, after her quiet life of 25 years, and how all that had happened to her was for cause of me. I bethought me of my father and his kingly estate, and how I had become a woodcutter, and how, after my time had been a while serene, the world had again waxed turbid and troubled to me. So I wept bitterly and repeated this couplet. What time fate's tyranny shall most oppress thee, perpend, one day shall joy thee, and one distress thee. Then I walked till I reached the home of my friend the tailor, whom I found most anxiously expecting me. Indeed, he was, as the saying goes, on coals of fire for my account. And when he saw me, he said, all night long my heart hath been heavy, fearing for thee from wild beasts or other mischances. Now praise be to Allah for thy safety. I thanked him for his friendly solitude, and retiring to my corner, sat pondering and musing on what had befallen me, and I blamed and chided myself for my meddlesome folly and my forwardness in kicking the alcove. I was calling myself to account, when behold, my friend the tailor came to me and said, O youth, in the shop there is an old man, a Persian, who seeketh thee. He hath thy hatchet and thy sandals, which he hath taken to the woodcutters, saying, I was going out at what time the Mussulman began the call to dawn prayer, when I chanced upon these things, and know not whose they are. So direct me to their owner. The woodcutters recognized thy hatchet, and directed him to thee. He is sitting in my shop, so fare forth to him, and thank him, and take thine axe and sandals. When I heard these words, I turned yellow with fear, and felt stunned as by a blow. And before I could recover myself, lo, the floor of my private room clove asunder, and out of it rose the Persian, who was the Ilfrit. He had tortured the lady with exceeding tortures. Nevertheless, she would not confess to him aught. So he took the hatchet and the sandals, and said to her, As surely as I am Girgis of the seed of Iblis, I will bring thee back the owner of this and these. Then he went to the woodcutters with the pretence aforesaid, and being directed to me, after waiting a while in the shop till the fact was confirmed, he suddenly snatched me up as a hawk snatcheth a mouse, and flew high in the air, but presently descended and plunged with me under the earth, I being aswoon the while. And lastly, set me down in the subterranean palace wherein I had passed that blissful night. And there I saw the lady, stripped to the skin, her limbs bound to 4 stakes, blood welling from her sides. At that sight my eyes ran over with tears. But the Ilfrit covered her person and said, O wanton, is not this man thy lover? She looked upon me and replied, I wot him not, nor have I ever seen him before this hour. Quoth the Ilfrit, What, this torture, and yet not confessing? And quoth she, I never saw this man in my born days, and it is not lawful in Allah's right to tell lies on him. If thou know him not, said the Ilfrit to her, take this sword and strike off his head. She bent the sword in hand and came close up to me, and I signalled her with my eyebrows, my tears the while flowing adown my cheeks. She understood me, and made answer also by signs. how couldst thou bring all this evil upon me? And I rejoined after the same fashion, this is the time for mercy and forgiveness. And the mute tongue of my case spake aloud, saying, mine eyes were dragomans, my tongue betide, and told full clear the love I fain would hide. When last we met, and tears in torrents railed, for tongue struck dumb my glances testified. She signed with eye glance while her lips were mute, and I signed with fingers, and she kenned the amplified. Our eyebrows did all their duty twixt or twain, and we, being speechless, love spake loud and plain. Then, O my mistress, the lady, threw away the sword, and said, how shall I strike the neck of one I wot not, and who hath done me no evil? Such deed were not lawful in my law. And she held her hand. Said the Ifrit, 'tis grievous to see thee slay thy lover, and because he hath lain with thee, thou endurest these torments and obstinately refusest to confess. After this, it is clear to me that only like loveth and pitieth like. Then he turned to me and asked me, O man, haply thou also dost not know this woman. Whereto I answered, and pray, who may she be? Assuredly I never saw her till this instant. Then, take the sword, said he, and strike off her head, and I will believe that thou wottest her not, and will leave thee free to go, and will not deal hardly with thee. I replied, that will I do. And taking the sword, went forward sharply, and raised my hand to smite. But she signed to me with her eyebrows. Have I failed thee in aught of love? Is it thus that thou requitest me? I understood what her looks implied, and answered her with an eye glance, I will sacrifice my soul for thee. And the tongue of the case wrote in our hearts these lines, how many a lover with his eyebrows speaketh, to his beloved as his passion pleadeth. With flashing eye in his pattern he inspireth, and well she seeth what he pleading needeth. How sweet the look when each on other garreth, and with what swiftness, and how sure it speedeth. And this with eyebrows all his passion writeth, and that with eyeballs all his passion readeth. Then my eyes filled with tears to overflowing, and I cast the sword from my hand, saying, O mighty Ilfrit and hero, if a woman lacking wits and faith deem it unlawful to strike off my head, how can it be lawful for me, a man, to smite her neck when I never saw her in my whole life? I cannot do such a misdeed, though thou cause me to drink the cup of death and perdition. Then said the Ilfrit, ye twain, show the good understanding between you, but I will let you see how such doings end. He took the sword and struck off the lady's hands first with 4 strokes, and then her feet, whilst I looked on and made sure of death, and she farewelled me with her dying eyes. So the Ilfrit cried at her, thou whorest, and make me a whittle with thine eyes, and struck her so that her head went flying. Then he turned to me and said, O mortal, we have it in our law that, when the wife committeth adultery, it is lawful for us to slay her. As for this damsel, I snatched her away on her bride night, when she was just a young girl, and she knew no one but myself. I used to come to her once in every 10 days and lie with her the night, under the semblance of a man, a Persian. And when I was well assured that she had cuckolded me, I slew her. But as for thee, I am not well satisfied that thou hast wronged me in her. Nevertheless, I must not let thee go unharmed. So, ask a boon of me, and I will grant it. Then I rejoiced, O my lady, with exceeding joy, and said, What boon shall I crave of thee? He replied, Ask me this boon, into what shape shall I bewitch thee? Wilt that be a dog, or an ass, or an ape? I rejoined, and indeed I had hope for mercy to be shown to me. By Allah, spare me, that Allah sparing thee for sparing a Muslim and a man who never wronged thee. And I humbled myself before him with exceeding humility, and remained standing in his presence, saying, I am sore pressed by circumstance. He replied, Talk me no long talk. It is in my power to slay thee, but I give of thee instead thy choice. Quoth I, O thou Ilfrit, it would besit thee to pardon me, even as the envied pardoned the envier. Quoth he, And how was that? And I began to tell him. Excuse me. And this is the next tale within the tale within the tale. The tale of the envier and the envied. They relate, O Ilfrid, that in a certain city were 2 men who dwelt in adjoining houses, having a common party wall, and one of them envied the other, and looked on him with an evil eye, and did its utmost endeavour to injure him. And, albeit at all times he was jealous of his neighbour, his malice at last grew on him, till he could hardly eat or enjoy the sweet pleasures of sleep. But the envied did nothing save prosper. And the more he strove to injure him, the more he got, and gained, and throve. At last, the malice of this neighbour and the man's constant endeavour to work him a harm came to his knowledge. So he said, By Allah, God's earth is wide enough for its people. And leaving the neighbourhood, he repaired to another city, where he bought himself a piece of land, in which was a dried-up draw-well, old and in ruinous condition. Here he built him an oratory, and, furnishing it with a few necessaries, took up his abode therein, and devoted himself to the prayer and worshipping Allah Almighty. And the fakirs and the holy mendicants flocked to him from all quarters, and his fame went abroad through the city and that countryside. Presently, the news reached his envious neighbour of what good fortune had befallen him, and how the city notables had become his disciples. So he travelled to the place, and presented himself at the holy man's hermitage, and was met by the envied with welcome and greeting and all honour. Then quoth the envier, I have a word to say to thee, and this is the cause of my faring hither, and I wish to give thee a piece of good news. So cometh with me to thy cell. Thereupon the envied rose and took the envier by the hand, and they went into the inmost part of the hermitage. But the envier said, "Bid thy fakirs to retire to their cells, for I will not tell thee what I have to say, save in secret, where none may hear us." Accordingly, the envied said to his fakirs, "Retire to your private cells." And when all had done as he had bade them, he set out with his visitor and walked a little way until the twain reached the ruinous old well. And as they stood upon the brink, the envier gave the envied a push which tumbled him headlong into it, unseen of any. Whereupon he fared forth and went his ways, thinking to have slain him. Now, this well happened to be haunted by the Jan, and as a side note, by the way, everyone, the Jan are the ancestors of the genii of the Ifrit. Now, this well happened to be haunted by the Jan, who, seeing the case, bore him up and let him down little by little till he reached the bottom, when they seated him upon a large stone. Then one of them asked his fellows, "What, ye who be this man?" And they answered, "Nay, this man," continued the speaker, "is the envied hight who, flying from the envier, came to dwell in our city, and here founded this holy house. He hath edified us by his litanies and his lections of the Koran." But the envier set out and journeyed till he rejoined him, and cunningly contrived to deceive him and cast him into the well where we now are. But the fame of this good man hath this very night come to the Sultan of our city, who designeth to visit him on the morrow on account of his daughter. "Well, what aileth his daughter?" asked one. And another answered, "She is possessed of a spirit. For Maimun, son of Dandam, is madly in love with her. But if this pious man knew the remedy, her cure would be as easy as could be." Hereupon one of them inquired, "And what is the medicine?" And he replied, "The black tomcat, which is with him in the oratory, hath on the end of his tail a white spot, the size of a dirham. Let him pluck 7 white hairs from the spot, and then let him fumigate her therewith, and the married will flee from her and not return. So she shall be the same for the rest of her life." All this took place, O Ifrit, within earshot of the envied, who listened readily. When dawn broke and morn arose in sheen and shone, the fakirs went to seek the sheikh, and found him climbing up the wall of the well, whereby he was magnified in their eyes. Then, knowing that naught save the black tomcat could supply him with the remedy required, he plucked the 7 tail hairs from the white spot and laid them by him. And hardly had the sun risen ere the Sultan entered the hermitage, and with the great lords of his estate, bidding the rest of his retinue to remain standing outside. The envied gave him a hearty welcome, and seating him by his side, asked him, "Shall I tell thee the cause of thy coming?" The king answered, "Yes." Excuse me, everybody, for that interruption. The king answered, "Yes." He continued, "Thou hast come upon pretext of visitation, but it is in thine heart to question me of thy daughter." Replied the king, "'Tis even so, O thou holy sheikh." And the envy continued, "Send and fetch her, and trust to heal her forthright, and such it be the will of Allah." The king in great joy sent for his daughter, and they brought her pinioned and fettered. The envied made her sit down beside a curtain, and taking out the hairs, fumigated her herewith. Whereupon that which was in her head cried out and departed from her. The girl was at once restored to her right mind, and veiling her face said, "What hath happened? Who brought me hither?" The Sultan rejoiced with a joy which nothing could exceed, and kissed his daughter's eyes, and said the holy man's hand, then turning to his great lords, he asked, "How say ye, what fee deserveth he who hath made my daughter whole?" Sorry, I've lost my place. Hold on a second, guys. I've got to reposition myself. Sorry, excuse me. There we go. I apologise. The envied made her... here we go. The girl was at once restored to her right mind, and veiling her face said, "What had happened? Who brought me hither?" The Sultan, rejoicing with a joy which nothing could exceed, kissed his daughter's eyes and the holy man's hand. Then, turning to his great lords, he asked, "How say ye? What fee deserveth he who hath made my daughter whole?" And all answered, "He deserveth her to wife." And the king said, "Ye speak sooth." So he married him to her, and the envied thus became the son-in-law to the king. And after a little, the wazir died. And the king said, "Whom can I make minister in his stead?" "Thy son-in-law," replied the courtiers. So the envied became a wazir. And after a while, the Sultan also died, and the lieges said, "Whom shall we make king?" And all cried, "The wazir." So the wazir was forthright made sultan, and he became king regent, a true ruler of men. One day, as he mounted his horse, and in the eminence of his kinglyhood was riding amidst his emirs and wazirs and the grandees of his realm, his eye fell upon his old neighbour, the envier, who stood afoot on his path. So he turned to one of his ministers and said, "Bring hither that man, and cause him no affright." The wazir brought him, and the king said, "Give him 1,000 miskals of gold from the treasury, and load him 10 camels with goods for trade, and send him under escort to his own town." Then he bade his enemy farewell, and sent him away, and forbore to punish him for the many great evils he had done. See, Ilfrit, the mercy of the envied to the envier, who had hated him from the beginning, and had borne him such bitter malice, and never met him without causing him trouble, and had driven him from house and home, and then journeyed for the sole purpose of taking his life by throwing him into the well. Yet he did not requite his injurious dealing, but forgave him, and was bountiful to him. Then I wept before him, O my lady, with sore weeping. Never was there sorer. And I recited, "Pardon my fault, for 'tis the wise man's wont all faults to pardon, and revenge forego. In sooth, all manner faults in me contain. Then deign of goodness, mercy, grace to show. Whose imploreth pardon from on high should hold his hands from sinners here below." Said the Ilfret, "Lengthen not thy words. As to my slaying thee, fear it not. As to my pardoning thee, hope it not. But from bewitching thee there is no escape." Then he tore me from the ground which closed under my feet, and flew with me into the firmament, till I saw the earth as a large white cloud or a saucer in the midst of the waters. Presently, he set me down on a mountain, and, taking a little dust, over which he muttered some magical words, sprinkled me therewith, saying, "Quit that shape, and take thou the shape of an ape." And on the instant I became an ape, a tailless baboon, the son of a century. Now, when he had left me, and I saw myself in this ugly and hateful shape, I wept for myself, but resigned my soul to the tyranny of time and circumstance, well weeting that fortune is fair and constant to no man. I descended the mountain and found at the foot a desert plain, long and broad, over which I travelled for the space of the month, till my course brought me to the brink of a briny sea. After standing there a while, I was aware of a ship in the offing, which ran before a fair wind making for the shore. I hid myself behind a rock on the beach, and waited till the ship drew nearer, when I leaped on board. I found her full of merchants and passengers, and one of them cried, "O Captain, this ill-omened brute will bring us ill luck." And another said, "Turn this ill-omened beast out from among us." And the captain said, "Let us kill it." And another said, "Slay it with a sword." And a third, "Drown it." And a fourth, "Shoot it with an arrow." But I sprang up and laid hold of the razier's skirt and shed tears which poured down my chops. The captain took pity on me and said, "O merchants, this ape hath appealed to me for protection, and I will protect him. Henceforth he is under my charge, so let none do him aught hurt or harm, otherwise there will be bad blood between us." Then he entreated me kindly, and whatsoever he said I understood, and ministered to his every want, and served him as a servant, albeit my tongue would not obey my wishes, so that he came to love me. The vessel sailed on, the wind being fair, for the space of 50 days, at the end of which we cast another under the walls of a great city, wherein was a world of people, specially learned men. None could tell their number save Allah. No sooner had we arrived than we were visited by a certain Mameluke officials from the king of that city, who after boarding us greeted the merchants, and giving them joy of safe arrival said, "Our king welcometh you, and sendeth you this roll of paper, whereupon each and every one of you must write a line. For ye shall know that the king's minister, a calligrapher renowned, is dead. And the king hath sworn a solemn oath that he will make none a wazir in his stead who cannot write as well as he could." He then gave us the scroll, which measured 10 cubits long by a breadth of 1, and each of the merchants knew how to write a line thereon, even to the last of them. After which I stood up, still in the shape of an ape, and snatched the roll out of their hands. They feared lest I should tear it or throw it overboard, so they tried to stay me and scare me. But I signed to them that I could write, whereat all marvelled, saying, "We never yet saw an ape write." And the captain cried, "Well, let him write, and if he scribble and scrabble, we will kick him out and kill him. But if he write fair and scholarly, I will adopt him as my son. For surely I never yet saw a more intelligent, more well-mannered monkey than he. Would heaven my real son were his match in morals and manners." took the reed and, snatching out my paw, dipped it in ink and wrote in the hand used for letters these 2 couplets. Time have recorded gifts she gave the great, but none recorded thine which be far higher. Allah, ne'er orphan men by lost of thee, who be of goodness mother, bounty's sire. And I wrote in Rehani, or larger letters elegantly curved, thou hast a reed of reed to every land, whose driving causeth all the world to thrive. Nil is the Nile of Mizraim by the booms, who makest misery smile with fingers 5. Then I wrote in Saul's character, there be no writer who from death shall fleet, but when his hand hath writ, men shall repeat. Write, therefore, naught save what shall serve thee when thou see it on judgment day, and so thou see it. Then I wrote in the character of Nas. When to sore parting fate our love shall doom, to distant life by destiny decreed, we caused the inkborn's lips to plain our pains, and tongue our utterance with the talking reed. And I wrote in Tumar character, kingdom with none endures if thou deny this truth, where be the kings of earlier earth. Set trees of goodliness while rule endures, and when thou art fallen, they shall tell thy worth. And I wrote in the character of Muhakkak, when oped the inkhorn of thy wealth and fame, take ink of generous heart and gracious hand. Write brave and noble deals while write thou can, and win thee praise from then point of pen and brand. Then I gave the scroll to the officials, and, after we had all written our line, they carried it before the king. When he saw the paper, no writing pleased him save my writing, and he said to the assembled courtiers, go, seek the writer of these lines, and dress him in a splendid robe of honour, then mount on him a she-mule. Let a hand of music precede him, and bring him to my presence. At these words they smiled, and the king was wroth with them, and cried, O accursed, I give you an order, and you laugh at me. O king, replied they, if we laugh, 'tis not at thee, and not without a cause. And what is it? asked he. And they answered, O king, thou orderest us to bring to thy presence the man who wrote these lines. Now, the truth is that he who wrote them is not of the sons of Adam, but an ape, a tailless baboon, belonging to the ship captain. Quoth he, is this true that you say? Quoth they, yea, by the rights of thy munificence. The king marvelled at their words, and shook with mirth, and said, I am minded to buy this ape of the captain. Then he sent messengers to the ship with the mule, the dress, the guard, and the state drums, saying, not the less do you clothe him in the robe of honour, and mount him on the mule, and let him be surrounded by the guards, and preceded by the band of music. They came to the ship, and took me from the captain, and robed me in the robe of honour, and, mounting me on the she-mule, carried me in a state procession through the streets, while the people were amazed and amused. And folk said to one another, Hello, is our sultan about to make an ape his minister? And came all agog, crowding to gaze at me. and the town was astir and turned topsy-turvy on my account. When they brought me up to the king and set me in his presence, I kissed the ground before him 3 times, and once before the High Chamberlain and great officers, and he bade me be seated, and I sat respectfully on shins and knees, and all who were present marvelled at my fine manners, and the king most of all. Thereupon he ordered the lieges to retire, and when none remained save the king's majesty, the eunuch on duty, and a little white slave, he bade them set before me the table of food, containing all manner of birds, whatever hoppeth and fleeth and treadeth in nest, such as quail and sandgrouse. Then he signed to me to eat with him, so I rose and kissed the ground before him, and then sat me down and ate with him. And when the table was removed, I washed my hands in 7 waters, and took the reed case and wrote instead, speaking these couplets. Wail for the little partridges on porringer and plate. Cry for the ruin of the fries and stews well marinate. Keen as I, keen for loved lost daughters of the cat a grouse, and omelette round the fair and browned fowls agglomerate. O fire in heart of me for fish, those deux poissons I saw, bedded on new-made scones and cakes in piles to laniate. For thee, O vermicelli, aches my very maw. I hold, without thee every taste and joy are clean annihilate. Those eggs have rolled their yellow eyes in torturing pains of fire, ere served with hash and fritters hot, that delicest Kate. Praised be Allah for his baked and roast, and ah, how good! This pulse, these pot herbs steeped in oils with eye-seal combinate. When hunger sated was, I elbow-propped fell back upon meat pudding, wherein gleamed the bangles that my wits amate. Then woke I sleeping appetite to eat as though in sport, sweets from brocaded trays and kickshaws most elaborate. Be patient, soul of me. Time is a haughty, jealous wight. Today he seems dark lowering, and tomorrow fair to sight. Then I rose and seated myself at a respectful distance while the king read what I had written and marvelled, exclaiming, "Oh, the miracle that an ape should be gifted with this graceful style and this power of penmanship! By Allah, this is a wonder of wonders." Presently, they set before the king choice wines in flagons of glass, and he drank. Then he passed on the cup to me, and I kissed the ground and drank, and wrote on it, "With fire they boiled me to lose my tongue, and pain and patience gave me fellowship. Hence come it hands of men upbear me high, and honeydew from lips of maid I sip. And there also, morn saith to night, withdraw and let me shine. So drain we draughts that dull all pain and pine. I doubt so fine the glass, the wine so clear. 'Tis the wine in glass, or glass in wine." The king read my verse and said with a sigh, "Were these gifts in man, he would excel all folk of his time and age." Then he called for the chessboard and said, "Say, wilt thou play with me? And I signed with my head, yes. Then I came forward and ordered the pieces and played with him 2 games, both of which I won. He was speechless with surprise, and so I took the pen case and, drawing forth a reed, wrote on the board these 2 couplets. 2 hosts, fair fighting through the livelong day, nor is their battling ever finished, until, when darkness girdeth them about, the twain go sleeping in a single bed. The king read these lines with wonder and delight, and said to his eunuch, O Mukbil, go to thy mistress, Sit al-Husun, and say her, come speak the king who biddeth thee hither to take thy solace in seeing this right wondrous ape. And we're on the last page, everybody. So the eunuch went out and presently returned with a lady who, when she saw me, veiled her face and said, O my father, hast thou lost all sense of honour? How cometh it thou art pleased to send for me and show me to strange men? O Sit Halsoon, said he, no man is here save this little foot-page and the eunuch who reared thee, and I, thy father. From whom, then, dost thou veil thy face? She answered, this, whom thou deemest an ape, is a young man, a clever and polite, and a wise, and a learned, and the son of a king. But he is ensorcelled, and the Ilfrit Jaris, who is the seed of Iblis, cast a spell upon him, after putting to death his own wife, the daughter of King Ifatimus, lord of the islands of Abmus. The king marvelled at his daughter's words, and turning to me said, is this true that she saith of thee? And I signed by a nod of my head the answer, yea, verily, and wept sore. Then he asked his daughter, whence knewest thou that he is ensorcelled? And she answered, O my dear papa, there was with me in my childhood an old woman, a wily one, and a wise and a witch to the boot, and she taught me the theory of magic and its practice, and I took notes in writing, and therein waxed perfect, and have committed to memory 170 chapters of egromantic formulas, by the least of which I could transport the stones of thy city behind the mountain Kaf, or make its site an abyss of the sea, and its people fishes swimming in the midst of it. O my daughter, said her father, I conjure thee, by my life, disenchant this young man, that I may make him my wazir, and marry thee to him, for indeed he is an ingenious youth, and a deeply learned. With joy and goodly gree, she replied, and handing in hand an iron knife, whereupon was inscribed the name of Allah in Hebrew characters, she described a wide circle. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. So, dear friends, ends the 13th night of 1001 Arabian Nights. Somebody count and tell me how many nights we've got left. I very much look forward to you joining us tomorrow. Tomorrow is Saman Giro, will be lending her voice and hosting the evening and reading you the 14th night of 1001 Arabian Nights. If you want to find out what happens to the prince, whether he gets turned back from being an ape, and what happens to the rest of the calendar story, and we have another story, we have a third calendar story to go. Remember, they are telling their stories to the 3 ladies of Baghdad to prevent themselves from being killed because they asked questions that they shouldn't. So I'm intrigued. These last 2 stories have certainly been very, very interesting. I'm certainly very intrigued to find out what happens next, because Saman and I don't know from one day to the next what is going to happen. And I did call Saman today after having read this story, and I said, oh my goodness, I don't know that I can read this story. It's certainly not for children. So I wanted to thank you all very, very much for joining me this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure for reading to you. I do apologise for the phone call I got in the middle of it, and for nudging my phone, which disconcerted me for a second. I hope you enjoyed it anyway and had a really great time with us. We do look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever it is. Please enjoy the full moon if you can see it, and have a wonderful, wonderful time. And don't forget, if you want to look at some other things to look at that other theatres are providing online, do check out our Facebook page and you'll find some other things that are going on. Many salams, take care, good night, bye-bye. Bye everyone.